before lunch. Next thing is lunch, isn't it? Or yeah. Yeah, it's a small group, so there won't be any questions, I assume. No, that's just a joke. There is this open space principle. Whoever comes is the right people, and so I really appreciate you're here. It's probably not so popular in terms of the topic. Maybe it sounds a little bit academic. There are academics here. I'm not sure what's next door. It's something about product, isn't it? Product ownership, whatever. Anyway, let's go ahead. I'm very happy being here. It's my first time actually in Dubai, not being at the airport only. Usually I'm traveling through Dubai to Asia. I'm doing a lot of business nowadays in Asia, in the area of India, China, Australia. So somehow that fits very well with my current setup. And I'm really happy being here with this crowd. Obviously growing interest around lean and agile. Lean is new, I think, this year, and agile methods. I'm in this industry. I've been in the IT industry since more than 25 years. That makes me really look old and feel old. So I experienced many, types of methods, approaches. I was a software developer myself in the late 80s, early 90s. Stopped doing that. I've got all the IDEs on my PC. They're all fresh, but the only thing I could do, I could ruin every stack without contributing any value. I've been in the agile arena since basically also 15 or even more than 15 years. So basically before this whole thing was coined, the name agile. So I started with extreme programming. And and so here we are. What you will not hear from me, I'm into many various methods. Extreme programming was one thing, not so much on my agenda nowadays. I'm helping organizations to transform. What a wonderful world we are in. Transforming organizations, whether it's about agile lean. I'm an official, I have to say, an official Kanban trainer, a legal one, via Lean Kanban University. I'm an illegal Scrum trainer. So I do Scrum trainings without having, any gratification from any organization yet. But that doesn't matter. I just helped 100 people, or actually was 80, to start their Scrum journey 2 months ago. So these things work also without certificates and accreditations. But just a little warning, I won't go too much into one single method. It's for me rather, I think that's what I stole already. It's a kind of thing, I have to turn this on actually. I stole this mojito method from Jürgen, who's sitting here. So what I'm into is more, mixing a great cocktail, which is just, right and well-fitting for a specific environment. So having that said, many customers call me in nowadays. They want to do Scrum, they want to do Kanban, whatever. But finally, if you talk closer to them, it's not about the methods. It's not at all about methods. It's really about their concrete business situation and what they would like to improve, what challenges they have, and this usually very individual challenges. So methods can help a lot, but finally, it's really about the right combination of what helps with a specific context. Yeah, it still doesn't work, so obviously also have to stand there. Did you use my clicker before? Anyway, yeah, I think I have that too. Helps the camera a little bit. Yeah, of course, this one, first of all, also thanks for the sponsorship. Great thing to make this event happen. Now, talking about adaptive organizations. Well, first of all, where's my smartphone? Anybody has a smartphone here? There's this little thing. Where is it actually? I'm missing it. This little thing, this little device. It's not advertising about any product or specific brand. But if you just think what you can do with such a device nowadays, there's lots of software running on these things. You can book a flight. You can book a hotel. You can call a cab. Special cabs like Uber taxis and so on and so forth. If you think 10 or even 15 years before how these things looked like, there were some kind of smartphones already on the market, but basically most of them were, touch dial things. And the thing you could do was calling, taking a phone call and so on. What is quite interesting, if you look on the market, those companies which used to dominate the market in the early 2000s, a little bit before, Are they the lead anymore? If you look, in today's business, if you look into the smartphone business, probably not. I mean, they're fighting for, the baseline operations and all these things. But when it comes to the innovative part, there is totally different players in the game nowadays. So there is obviously lots of change happening, which might make us consider, okay, what does that actually mean? I mean, we talked about, creating great software and using Scrum for this, creating better quality software. But the question is, first of all, is it about software at all nowadays? Or wouldn't it be a totally different question? Shouldn't we avoid to write much more software than we do today and reconsider what makes sense to focus on? That's the case for the adaptive organization. It basically means, what is the current environment doing to us, which is the environment we are currently operating in, and what's the future about? And that basically means, I love this quote of mine, which just means the future is still uncertain. It just happens faster than before, because future and all these things around strategy have way smaller and closer time windows. If we really look into this topic about setting up an organization which might be adaptive to its environment, which can react, which can basically thrive with what's happening out there, I would basically focus on 3 cornerstones. The first one, operational excellence, that's what we can start with. That's the actual Agile background. That's where we come from if we talk about Agile. But we have to go further. If we think about what we want to focus on, it's really about who will be our customers tomorrow and what should be our offering tomorrow, maybe even today. And finally, what helps us to drive forward, I call it leadership, when we talk about new ways of organizing, new ways of setting up organizations, and finally running organizations. Now let's start with the first one. We probably all know the Agile Manifesto is really a good one. I still do teaching around it. I help organizations understand it better. And it's obviously where we come from, what getting rid of organizational silos, getting rid of bad collaboration, focusing more on quality of deliverables. We just heard this done thing. So really, not just stopping somewhere, but really saying, okay, we have to get closer together and really focus on quality in order to, not have this constant vicious cycle of things coming back and going forth and back and forth and back in terms of quality issues and unhappy customers. And finally, being adaptable already on the level of software development and focusing more on customers. So if I condense what we might have learned out of this, and I don't quote now all the principles behind it, I would say it's much about focus on product, purpose, value creation. It's much about people in collaboration between people on different levels, whether it's in the IT department, whether it's in the business environment. It's about trust in the organization, trust in people, self-organization of little cells inside an organization. And finally, last but not least, embracing change, being adaptable. That's what the Agile Manifesto is basically all about, while it is still focusing on software development. But you might replace the term software with product nowadays, because obviously it's not only about software, it's way more. Although I would say no product today anymore, nearly no product, without software. So that's quite important. So any product out there will have some kind of software. There's this term, Internet of Things. Products of any type start communicating, start exchanging information, and suddenly there is software everywhere. So this is very, very important to understand and finally being able to work upon on the core bottom. Now, if we, and I love this picture very much, that's why I'm dragging it in from time to time. It's from a book called This is Lean by 2 guys from Sweden, Niklas Modig and Per Ahlström. It's a picture of a game we all know, soccer. I'm not sure if it's popular here, maybe not so much. I think cricket is more interesting here, I'm not sure. maybe Scrum, rugby. I'm not sure which kinds of games you play here. Which one? Oh, still. Okay, so you're at the championship? Oh, no, it's European Championship. Sorry for this one this year. By the way, I'm Austrian, so I'm very proud of the Austrian team this year participating after 30 years in an official championship again. Playing a game, what does that need? So if we would play the game of software, what would we need comparing it to soccer? What would we need? Any ideas? What would help actually to play and succeed with this game? A ball? Yeah, having a ball, that's good. A goal, yeah. What else? Teamwork, yeah. What do we need for teamwork? A referee, somebody helping us to oversee the big picture. What do we need for teamwork? Strategy, well, yeah, that's somehow the bigger picture. Where do we want to go? But on the field, coordination, that's a good one. How do we coordinate on the field? Yeah, sure. Yeah, and how do we coordinate on the field? I just heard coordination before. Yeah, we have to, basically what we have to have, knowing each other. We have to hear other people, we have to see other people, we have to hear the referee, just mentioning the referee. So lots of things just to be aware of what's going on, where the ball is, how we do play the ball, and so on and so forth. Now, this is the wishful thinking, and this is sometimes reality. Everybody on the field playing their own game in their own tent with their own ball, without knowing the others, without hearing anything, and just playing around. And to be honest, this can even happen in an agile environment, or let's say, using agile methods for software development, call it this way. Why? Because, there are possibilities that we are very agile in one part of the software development area, while, there are some people in the business side doing things teams are not really aware of, and other people, taking care for delivery, like, ops and these things, again, are not really attaching to what's going on in the agile software teams. So, obviously, there is more than just, focusing on practices. There is really, the focus on principles, which is way more important. That's why I referenced the Agile Manifesto, and even more finally, understanding of people's desires and people's backgrounds, call it values somehow, people attach to. Why they're in this game and why they want to participate and what they would like to improve. Now, if we look into a typical larger organization consisting of more than one team, this could look somehow like this. Let's assume you have 3 teams or 3 areas or departments. Then suddenly you will recognize there are probably a few dependencies going on between teams. I know there are methods here for this too, talking about less safe, whatever they're called. We try to avoid these dependencies, but if you go for 50, 100, more than 100 people, you will probably have dependencies. You will probably not only develop one product, but many products. You will also have a couple of services running around the organization. So people taking care for, operations, whatever support is needed across the organization. You will suddenly see, if you, focus on visualization, where the work sits, how these dependencies look like. Now the clue here is to say, well, if we start something like an agile approach, we would love to go beyond one single team, and we would actually, in terms of growing our operational capability, our operational excellence, start actually working on issues in this area. What could be issues? Well, maybe there is some work sitting in a Scrum team or any other team, you don't have to do Scrum here, where you just say, well, this work is blocked somehow because some guy in the operations department doesn't provide us a platform. What are we going to do about this? Well, we can wait and see. We can wait until the next issue comes up. Or we can just start saying, well, maybe we should have a focus on this issue and get more and more of these issues out of our way, systematically work on them and remove them. Where we finally do this more and more across the whole organization, because that also can go upwards, upstream as we sometimes call it. Some information missing or some problems with business domains. We start working on a kind of improvement culture. We do not just say, well, let's just focus on our thing, but we really start moving things all together, because the only thing which counts finally for a customer is the end-to-end experience. It's not so important to say, well, one team did a great job with developing the whole thing via agile methods or following any principles here, but the final delivery sucked because it didn't meet our initial requirements, or it didn't come out of the door in time. It was already coded, but it was not yet on the operations platform. So first thing here we want to do, we want to understand our systems better. And the interesting thing here is that systems have a very, very, huge impact on the whole behavior of the development efforts. There is this quote from Mr. Deming, who said about 95% of the performance of a whole system is actually driven by the capability of the system, by the culture which we have here in this organization. And only 5%, about 5%, can be driven by individuals. This basically means you can work harder and harder and harder. You will only always improve these 5%. So you have to work on the whole system. Now this is a first start. Looking across your whole service network, looking to your capabilities, which you might see via different types of visualization. There's a kind of lead time distribution chart, which just tells you, okay, what's the average lead time for work getting out of our door? And the more we shift to the left, and the smaller our tail here is, the faster we are, the more responsive we can be towards customer requirements, and the less risk we have here to miss actually windows of opportunities for customers. So the key element here is to grow capabilities over time. This is nothing starting from one day to the other. It's somehow growing a capability for improvement. Improving across our whole systems, not only within one team, but across the whole organization, and spreading this kind of virus across the whole organization. There's lots of potentials in there to just become better at what we are doing. Via specific principles, following specific principles, we can easily improve throughput by many 100% through our system. We can decrease lead time by maybe 90% of our initial behavior. And this, of course, has lots of benefits. It finally has the benefit of customers not having to wait any longer. It has maybe the benefit of side effect of improved quality. We have more focus. And finally, we have a better responsive system. A little bit better predictability and reliability. Now the thing here is, if we look at the purpose of what we just tried to achieve with this operational excellence, this is sometimes very much focusing on teams. Teams which used to be overburdened with lots of work from different directions. Teams which now want to have more focus and do the work they always wanted to do in the right quality. But the thing is, there is way more in the organization. If we look into the organization, like many teams, departments, there's actually a kind of orchestration needed to say, how do we actually make decisions here, how to prioritize, what to do next, maybe what to deprioritize, and so on and so forth. So basically, this is directly focusing on this capability growth, to say we want to be able to understand better how we finally are able to orchestrate our services, whether it's software development, whether it's any kind of other service we have in the organization. And last but not least, and that's probably even more important, think about the whole organization, considering survivability. Because finally, it's all about not software we deliver to the markets, but what are the markets currently doing? What should we currently invest into? And that brings me actually now a little bit further from this initial Agile Manifesto, which is already 15 years old, toward Kent Beck's Beyond Agile Manifesto. I think he wrote that in 2010 or 2009. Just adding to what you know from the Agile Manifesto, some additional phrase, so leveling it up a little bit and just saying, like, instead of individuals and interactions over process and tools, we should actually even more focus on why we are doing this. Team vision, not just people, across the organization, but what's the actual vision, what we want to achieve here. And even better, if you look at working software, which is a very good achievement if we can do this, done things, not just half-baked solutions, but not just delivering features, but saying, well, what we want to have finally is validated learning out of it. Is the software we deliver useful for anyone? Do we create impact with it? So very first step for this could be teams setting up a task board or Scrum board or Kanban board and having the last column called validated. Not just delivered or done or whatever, but did we have a final conversation with the customer to figure out on an educated basis, did the single feature or did this type of software create any value? Did it create any impact? And what could we learn out of this? And last but not least, not only customer collaboration, but also customer discovery. Because the thing is, most of the software we write today is probably for a target audience we know less than we used to know it before. It's not so much about the internal customers anymore. It's more about markets outside in this, we call it internet, where we don't even know who are the customers or who might be the customers of tomorrow. Finally, initiating change instead of just responding to change. And that brings us a little bit closer to the adaptive organization. Now, there was a nice quote from Alistair Cockburn, one of the other signatories of the Agile Manifesto, I think this week, and I had to pick it up from Facebook, where he just posted this one and said, wow, we're obviously now in the age of hypothesis testing instead of feature development. So before we focus on how many great features could we develop, let's first of all think, well, why would we do something? What would be our assumption about it, so the hypothesis, and how could we test it before even creating this piece of software? And he even quoted this term like, we're obviously somehow shifting into a totally new age, a new world of software development since last year, this year, that's his expectation. So what I want to underline here is that agile methods alone don't make a business agile. And the interesting thing here is that obviously the whole thing is about business. You want to survive as a business, you want to succeed as a business, and software development alone is not enough. And probably you know this guy who basically proved this. Eric Ries, who, well, more or less invented is a little bit too much. Steve Blank was, I think, the godfather of the lean startup method. But he wrote the book, which you might know. Anybody knows the book? Yeah, most of you, or 50%, call it this way. And the story was exactly about this. Half a year of software development, applying any good practice around software development and organizing the whole approach like Scrum, extreme programming, anything. And after half year, the learning that nobody in the internet, where the audience was sitting, needed this piece of software or was aware of it. No download at all. So the first thought was, well, how could we have learned this way earlier? And the conclusion was basically, well, if we would have set up a static HTML page, nicely formatted, with a download button on it, without developing any software, we could have exactly learned the same thing. Nobody would have pressed the download button. So what Eric actually triggered with this, kind of concept or method around lean startup was a whole tribe. A tribe of people which is out now in the internet world, constantly working on new product ideas, but without immediately jumping into implementation, trying to start learning from the very beginning. And there are currently thousands of startups in the world which are competing for venture capitalists' money. Alone in Berlin, as far as I know, there's every 20 minutes per day a new startup founded in this digital world. So what's happening here is just a kind of threat to any established organization to reconsider their position. And it's quite funny, you might know, depends upon your age, some of these companies, Digital Equipment Corporation, not everybody might know in here. I was one of the leading IT companies, one of the large ones. big whatever, big five, don't know. But it's not there anymore. It was somehow, declining, captured by Compaq somehow going towards HP. It doesn't exist anymore. Nokia, we all know, had a great story, but these guys do not exist in terms of the smartphone market anymore. Kodak, what a shame, because Kodak invented the digital photography. In 1975, they actually came up with the first, I think it was 0.01 megapixels camera, but at least they invented this technology. They invented a couple of other technologies around photo sharing, many of these things, but they couldn't get it out of the door because obviously there are a couple of things holding you back when you're already successful, just jumping onto the next wagon. And because we heard it before, I think Dave had this VW thing here. Who knows what's happening to the car industry in general? It's just an example in the next future, because what is car industry is about? Manufacturing of cars? Probably not, because it's probably more about mobility services. And then we're suddenly in a total different arena. Do we still need to produce lots of cars anymore? Well, maybe we have to reconsider this. Now, if we look at other examples, there are just a few of those, and you see the new players in here which are currently threatening existing companies. Many of these companies started somewhere totally else and then became successful in a totally new field. Just for an example, PayPal, most people might know as a payment platform. Well, initially this was only built for Palm Pilots. Not sure if you know this device. It's an old mobile device, the first arena of smartphones maybe. Twitter, quite interesting, was initially a podcasting company. And you know what it's here for today. So what this basically says, you cannot be sure about today's business where it will be tomorrow, because you have to consider what's currently going on there. Whether you call it evolution, exaptation, which is a quite interesting term, I know from Dave Snowden. Just something which might become, or achieve a totally different purpose over time because of its environment, because of its usage, like, for example, Twitter. And there's lots of disruption going on out there permanently. So what that means is basically we obviously have to consider a kind of economy out there, either industry, whether it's finance, whether it's traveling, whether it's as I said, automotive, and many, many others, or gaming. Just consider in a gaming industry, a fast-growing industry. Just obviously considered Amazon coming up with a gaming engine based upon their platform, and suddenly, since a few weeks, the whole game changes a lot. Now, the concept behind this challenge and problem, you might know the Innovators Dilemma from Clayton Christensen. The problem, when you have an established business, you brought it up to scale, so you focused on this operational excellence, then you suddenly have the challenge that you're not so much open anymore for great new things, which are unfortunately totally uncertain. Because total uncertainty means you have to invest money, you have to allow people to experiment, you have to even consider, well, maybe small growth, maybe dropouts at a certain point. And such a type of business might not fit to a large corporate environment where people expect a specific type of profit contribution margin. Now, what can we do about it? Let's think about the wealth of an organization where we create profit from, about this model from a couple of McKinsey guys. It's quite an old model from the late 90s. A company making profits and sustaining growth actually over 3 horizons. First horizon is the known one, the 1-year cycle, the thing where we make profits with what we have now. We're constantly, trying to become more effective, more efficient, basically, with what we're doing now. And that's what we're earning money from. Obviously, very important. Next comes this, initially thought, a larger time window, which was about 1.5 years and a little bit more, where we are already thinking about tomorrow's revenue growth. And finally comes the groundbreaking, future potentials. Most companies struggle, obviously, with this Horizon 3 and already with Horizon 2, investing money there, because the challenge is that we are basically focusing on Horizon 1 in terms of, shareholder value, quick ROI, and all these things, and that's what I just mentioned. Experimenting, which was needed, and learning, which was needed up here, not very welcome. Doesn't fit into a corporate culture. Now, the interesting thing about this, each company actually needs investments on all three horizons. So if you want to survive, you basically have to focus on all three of them. But the thing is, what I just mentioned as an example with the timelines, with the time horizons, these things obviously start shrinking. So we're not talking probably, if we talk about something like Horizon 3 anymore, about the 3-year cycle, but this is already going on now. It's something for next year maybe. It depends. It can be really going on in parallel. So this challenges every organization's thinking and operating. Yeah, there is something you can do about it. You might not do anything. So survival is optional, Mr. Deming said. But what you can consider is actually separating these two concerns of exploiting your existing business model as good as it gets. So that's more about focusing on operational excellence and exploring new opportunities. Exploring means what could be new market segments, new technologies, new customers. And you have to bring those two basically into balance. So this is basically something which builds, or buys into doing continuously something which we might call innovation. So innovation on a process level, is something how we do better what we do now. Getting rid of those blockers, becoming more fluent, having better flow efficiency and all these things. But on the other hand side, having experiments, having little startups within the company, or investing into startups which might fulfill our business for tomorrow. I go over this because it's already a little bit late in time. Now, adding to Steve Blank, now comes the big challenge. Unfortunately, innovation inside an existing organization is not easy. So, because innovation is not just like, setting up a new incubator and then figuring out, well, there is innovation happening, but we cannot attach it to our existing business lines. We cannot incorporate it into our existing corporate culture. What are we going to do about it? Well, we first of all have to consider that exploration and exploitation needs totally different ways of organizing and different ways of managing. Very important. It's not the same people maybe even working in both areas. It might be people, and that's a nice model from an expert from the UK, Simon Wardley, who came up with this kind of mapping your technology from totally innovative to kind of utility, and saying, well, the beginning of the whole journey with a new business, with a new technology, might be people compared to pioneers. Pioneers who, explored a new land and just started to, learn, and who are just curious about doing something new. Maybe a totally different type of people, which are those guys who are already growing the big thing, who are scaling up a business. These people are different people potentially, but also need different types of management structures, maybe management disciplines, and so on and so forth. So you have a kind of natural development for every new endeavor from pioneers, then comes the settlers, these guys who are doing something with what pioneers, started to make happen, and finally, the city starts growing and it needs planners, town planners who are taking care for the whole thing is organic and consistent. Another model here which helps, thinking about how an organization might be set up is this bi-model or dual operating system, sorry, not bi-model, dual operating system to say, if you want to take care of your existing business, you probably need a kind of efficient structure. This is a model by John Cotter, and I like the model. The only thing I struggle with is a little bit if it has to be a hierarchy. So question about existing businesses run by hierarchy. You could actually replace it with any kind of network type of organization. But what is important, you have to be able to start little innovation hubs. You have to be able to initiate and incorporate within your organization these places where innovation happens. You can compare it to Apple, who created the Apple Macintosh, who just went into a different building, separating themselves a little bit without too much bridging to the original organization and creating something new. And the thing you have to solve then is the question, how do you get then from pioneers via settlers to town planners when an idea is successful? Now, what we have here is organizations who are not able to, question their existing business models, who are still, using management technologies which are basically about 100 years old. So we have to rethink how we manage such an organization in order to build upon operational excellence, in order to be able to adapt, to react to the market, customers, products. What do we need in order to succeed? There's lots of change happening out there in addition. Just go with this slide. Just add this one because, we talk about digitalization everywhere. In Germany, we talk about Industry 4.0, and this word has already been used now even in the US. It's about more automation in the factory. It's more intelligence. There's lots of products coming out at the moment. Internet of Things, I mentioned it before. It could be any kind of product. The printer industry started with it. I think they talked also about the fridges in the kitchen, just calling for new refills. But it can be a light bulb. Light bulb, just having a movement detection sensor in there, and just saying, okay, I turn on the light when somebody is in. But this could also work as an alarm system. So the system's, turning on the light, sending me a message to my smartphone and telling me, oh, somebody is at home who shouldn't be at my home at the moment. So many of these products now growing up and becoming basically IP addresses in a huge internet and creating lots of data. Companies basically have to consider to say, how can we work up on this? How can we provide services on these new types of products when we have a totally different sales force, which is just used to deliver, and then closing the deal and then not talking to customers anymore. Self-driven cars, I mentioned mobility services, happening everywhere now. Printer maker industry in terms of 3D printing. We just heard about, well, the home printers might not be coming so soon, but still, this is something heavily disrupting industries. The plastic industry in China and all these things. So what we need for, adapting to this, go over this slide basically, is to consider an organization which is, not only following a hierarchy, an organization which is probably even having a smaller core in the future. And there is some guys talking about this via the exponential organization, because we're able to engage communities outside of our initial or old boundaries. A successful organization nowadays doesn't have to have all functions on board anymore. You can actually grow via communities. You can engage the community for doing some of your jobs. And exponential basically means it's for every industry, whether it's healthcare, whether it's all the industry I just mentioned, finance and so on. Things are exponentially growing in a very short time frame in terms of ecosphere, in terms of players, in terms of offerings. And the only thing you can do here is adapt with your organization to say, well, if we had a static hierarchy here, that wouldn't help a lot. Now, what you have to do is to consider finally, well, what is the driving force behind of all this? It's the people. And it doesn't work, I think. Yeah. Finally, it's all about people. So we have operational excellence. That's fine to start with, agile software development. We have to reconsider, well, where to focus on. Which products should we actually deliver tomorrow? What could we leave out? Maybe really focus on the agile principle, maximize what we don't do. and be liquid for what's important tomorrow. Now, what we need here is actually also a different type of leadership. Again, I can reference to Jürgen here because I'm also into this Management 3.0 concept since quite a few years now. It's obviously important to consider management, organizations, and leadership not being a mechanic and hierarchical thing anymore, but being something which engages people, which actually provides an environment where we say, well, we have to manage the system, but people should, self-manage in these environments. They should be, finding an environment which is creative, which is helping them to solve problems. I think over this. Well, we have to focus on purpose from various perspectives. Purpose is not only driven by the organization. Purpose is driven from, customers, and it's driven by people, and we have to consider how do we bring these, values and these, let's say, desires together to actually, drive people buy-in and finally bring people onto one level to not actually kill their adaptiveness they bring with them when they're kids. So that's actually happening in large hierarchies. But everybody coming into an organization is usually, prepared to do something great, to create something, but the hierarchy, the way of thinking and working, usually destroys this gift. These are my two kids, by the way, who are driving me nuts. But they were exploring the world. So, it's really the question how we shape the environment where they can grow and basically experiment with what they are doing. Experiments are obviously a very important thing. And so a final one, in the Agile world, we always talk about mindsets, and we want to change people's mindsets. I'm very, very careful with this. I don't want to change anybody's mindset, but I find this model very helpful to say, think about mindsets which are rather fixed and limited, very much driven by hierarchical organizations, comparable to growth mindsets. Growth mindsets where we say, well, we have some understanding about where we come from and what we believe things should work like, but we are ready to give up our beliefs if we learn something new. And this is very, very important, something you should, in your organization, foster it wherever it goes. Strong opinions, weakly held is one of these phrases which matches well to this type of mindset. So you can be really aware of why you want to do something, what you stand for, but if somebody comes up with a different opinion and tells you, maybe gives you data, whatever it is, reason to change your mind, then we'll be ready for it. So another important one to add here at the end is actually to say, well, all of this is obviously about change. And we always have this phrase to say, people resist change, but I don't believe that it's a general term we can use and say, well, everybody resists change. It obviously depends upon the individual, the type of people, and the environment we give those people so that they can adapt to the environment. Changing needs some rewiring of frames. Not sure if you can read this. Any idea? Yeah. And the thing is, if I move away the black bar here, it's just to say, well, it's not what your brain told you. And the thing is, if we want to experiment more in our organizations, what we need to do is just open our minds a little bit. We have to become, we have to get rid of just downloading what we already know, because it always worked this way. We really have to consider, how could it be tomorrow? What else could it be? How could it work? Anybody knows this one? Yeah, what is it? Yeah, and why is it this way? Yeah. It's a kind of optical challenge. Illusion, yeah. And you just trapped into this illusion because one thing is really longer than the other. So what you already did again, you knew the solution already and you downloaded it again and you had the solution at hand. So what we need here is obviously in an organization which wants to become ready for changing the way we do business, changing the way we focus on products, reorganizing our product portfolio. We really need to drive change in a way to say it cannot be a big upfront plan again. It has to be a constant experimentation cycle. This one is again from Jürgen's tribe, the Happy Melly tribe, lean change cycle. It's basically the typical PDCA or OODA, whatever cycle you want to call it, just to say, well, we do not know what we do not know up front. We only can generate some sort of insights and then start coming up with ideas for what we could do, and then have a kind of hypothesis-driven learning cycle here. And then we just say, well, learning means if some things work, we might do more of it. If some things don't work, we don't have to blame anyone. We just can say, well, it was a learning. We validated it. We can go on from here. This, again, for organizational change, can grow and can help grow a change capability across the organization. So I was talking about culture before. I was talking about hierarchies before. What we need to do here, if we want to shift from hierarchies to more, type of networked organization, we have to run experiments in the organization and figure out what works. It's no blueprints we can download and just say, well, we heard Kotter's model before. That's the way, the procedure we have to follow. But it's always an individual approach you have to consider. Now, if we sum this up, adaptive organization is obviously something which might be helpful in every industry and for every organization succeeding tomorrow. It's not enough to just have a kind of best practice or good practice engineering out there. You need to have a more educated kind of decision making and discovery about what your business is in terms of customers, market, products. You have to have faster learning cycles to be built into your organization. And you finally have to constantly, because I think I heard it before, inspect and adapt. Your choices, finally, to disrupt actually your own business model from time to time. You have to get rid of your existing products, disrupt your own products, otherwise somebody else will do tomorrow. I said before, there are thousands of startups out there to work upon the next big thing. Finance industry, just one example, they're really growing very, very fast. There's one company in Frankfurt, I think they have already many, many millions of shareholder money which they manage for different services outside of typical banks. And every bank nowadays knows that the retail business is under challenge, and we also know that the commercial business is under challenge. So the thing you can do here is basically constantly inspect and adapt, explore, learn, and shift your direction whenever it's needed as an organization. Okay, I think we were a little bit over time. I didn't make it in 40 minutes, but I think I made it in 15 minutes, so not too bad either. Are there any questions? Maybe there's one. Please, come on, one question.
No questions?
Otherwise, I would invite you for a nice lunch outside. I'm not sure where it is. Better? Yeah, let's go ahead. Thank you.